Hello, welcome back to 10 at 10. My name is Michael Ramage. I'm the director of the Cyber Education Research Center here at Murray State University, and welcome back to 10 at 10. 10 at 10 is brought to you through a partnership between Murray State University, Grow West, the Technology Council of West Kentucky, KY Innovation, and local partner Sprocket Innovation in Paducah, and the Kentucky Innovation Station in Madisonville. This is episode number 78, and we are continuing our discussion on cyber hygiene. How do we improve our cyber hygiene? This is part 4 of that series, and we're going to cover the last few steps of things that we should be doing, steps that we should be taking in our organization to help make our cyber hygiene a little better and ultimately making our companies and organizations a little safer. So let's jump into it. Before we go into anything new, I want to revisit last week. Last week we talked about creating a vendor risk management plan, and it's important that we do that. But what I talked about were vendors like an AC vendor. It's also while it doesn't say supply chain on this, it is important to also think about the digital supply chain and digital vendors, software vendors, hardware vendors. If you're using a vendor for a piece of software, maybe it's a management software, maybe it's a managed service provider, you also have to be have some consideration of the risk associated with those vendors as well. So it's not just vendors that are going to be coming into your building or providing you with physical goods. It's also those vendors that are going to be monitoring your network or providing you some technical or maybe it's even financial or it's security services as well. So all vendors outside of your organization need to go into this vendor risk management planning process as well. All right, so number 9, it took us to step number 9 to get to this, but educating employees on good practices is extremely important. So this is employee awareness, training, education. If we are doing all of these things, but we're not educating our employees on how to have good passwords or email vigilance or how to use organizations' network securely, then we are missing a big part of our good cyber hygiene. Probably a month ago, maybe it's been 2 months now. I always lose track with talking about 10 at 10s, but we talked about the human factor. We've got to make sure that we include the human factor in all of everything that we do with cybersecurity because our human factor is probably the biggest component of our organization. It's not the technical stuff, it's our people, it's our employees. So if we're not helping our employees understand what good practices look like, training them, teaching them, then we're going to be missing out on quite a bit. So that step is extremely important. And then finally, step number 10, utilize endpoint protection products to detect and protect against malware. We have all sorts of malicious software. We have worms and viruses and ransomware and all these things that are bad, malware that could install a back door into our system. We've got to have some sort of software that can detect those as well. Some attackers are going to use what's called zero-day exploits. That means it's malware that doesn't have a signature out there yet, so it's going to be hard for us to detect that. But a lot of software that is out there has a signature, meaning it's been seen in the wild before. So experts have developed an updated endpoint detection software so that it can detect that signature for that piece of malware. So we've got to make sure that we're doing that. If we're not deploying that, then again, we're missing part of that good cyber hygiene process. So those are 10 steps. Those are 10 steps that we can go through to provide better cyber hygiene for our organizations. I go back to what I said at the very beginning in the first episode. First episode of the series, that is, if we can improve our cyber hygiene, then perhaps we can move ourselves from being that easy target so that if the attacker comes, the threat actor comes looking at us, they scan us, they do some reconnaissance, and they find out that we're not the low hanging fruit. We're not the easy victim. then maybe they move on and they go to somebody else. That's what we're trying to do with cyber hygiene practices, and that's something that you should consider doing for sure. So, what's next? If you remember the analogy I used when we started this series, we talked about what do you do um, to ensure that you don't get cavities or have to have a root canal or a tooth pull. You brush your teeth, you floss, but you don't only do that. You still go to the dentist for a checkup. So after you implement all of these cyber best practices that improve your cyber hygiene, what do? You still go to the dentist. You still go to the doctor. You still do annual checkups or semi-annual checkups. You still have to do that to make sure that you're not missing something. Maybe you have brushed your teeth twice a day, maybe even at lunch, and you flossed every day, but you missed something on your teeth. That dentist is going to find it. That dentist is going to help you. So we've got to not only have these cyber best practices, these cyber hygiene steps, but we also need to have our annual checkups. So what's our annual checkups? Well, CISA, which is the cybersecurity organization within our federal government, offers vulnerability scanning, web application scanning, and phishing campaign assessments. So let me say that again. They offer that to government entities and critical infrastructure organizations. Maybe that's you, and maybe you can get these three things from CISA for free. Maybe that's not you. You should still consider these three areas. Vulnerability scanning. If you have done all of those 10 things, there still may be something that you're missing, still may be something that you haven't done. Actually, I know there is, because you should still implement firewalls, intrusion detection systems, do these other things. Maybe that vulnerability scan can show you some of those pieces that you should do on your network. Consider having a vulnerability scan on an annual basis, actually. A vulnerability scan is going to show you what's missing, what you haven't done. There's third parties that can do that. You could probably do that yourself, but if you don't know what you're doing, be careful, because you could also run into some problems and cause more problems and do more harm than good. So consider working with a third party. If you want to find out who in your area can do that, please feel free to reach out to me, and I will make some connections for you. Perhaps you don't want to do a full vulnerability scan of your network. Maybe you have some websites that you should do some web application scanning. Web apps, your website is something that you're broadcasting out to the world, so that world is going to see that website. So if they're going to attack you, the first thing they may see is your website. So they're going to try to perhaps do a SQL injection or try to do some things using some scripts and different things on your website. So web application scanning will help look at for vulnerabilities specifically that are through web applications. Phishing campaign assessment. The email, whether it's an email where you click on a link, you give a password, you open a file, those phishing emails are still extremely popular and still extremely effective. So if you're not on an annual basis or even more frequently than that testing your employees to help continue to train and improve their ability to identify phishing emails, I would recommend that you do that. Those are some easy things to do. There's third parties, again, that can help you do those things, just like the other two on this list. And I would highly recommend that you do that. Again, CISA offers these for free to government entities along with critical infrastructure organizations. If you want to find out how to see if you're eligible for these, reach out to me, let me know, and I'll be happy to help you out with some of that information. All other organizations, I would recommend that you do these at least on an annual basis. Some of you may be required to do these or even more because of compliance requirements. So hopefully you're doing these things. Hopefully you're continuing to assess where you're at and trying to find ways to continue to better your security posture, improve your cyber hygiene each year. Finally, some other things that you could do to look at your security posture, cyber hygiene, even more maybe extensive than cyber hygiene, is tabletop exercises, pen testing, and cybersecurity exercises. Perhaps we'll revisit these in a later 10 at 10. We're out of time for today. But the goal of this series has been to talk about those cybersecurity best practices, those cyber hygiene things that you should be doing, both at your organization and on an individual basis, to improve your cyber hygiene, improve your cybersecurity posture to help protect yourself and your organization in cyberspace. They're simple things by and large that we can do. We didn't talk about a lot of hardware in this, so it's actually a lot of things that take time, but most organizations can do and should be doing. I hope you take these recommendations to heart. I hope you start to implement them. And if you have questions about any of these, please don't hesitate to reach out. My contact information will be on the next slide. And I hope to hear from you. And thank you for joining today on 10 at 10. See you next week.